Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between, welcome to the Diversity Minded Podcast, episode 8 now, with myself, James Gale, and the
Melissa
lovely.
White.
Now, this is the third time I've recorded this intro for everyone's sake. Major tech issues. It's why I'm sweaty. But I had to tell you that because the theme today is authenticity, but a deeper dive. There's a lot to cover because it's just LinkedIn's favorite buzzword, but it's also something that's very important to our day-to-day lives. So we're going to talk about this in three sections. First of which is the dilemma of actually being authentic at work. Where's that line? The anxieties that come with that, all that lovely stuff. Second is the kind of psychological toll it can take on you if you're not yourself at work, because that's even harder. And masking constantly is the fast track to burnout. And third is the business case for actually being authentic at work, how it can actually impact the bottom line in a positive way. Happy people make good shit is one of the things I like to say. So excuse my language, but Melissa, I'm going to throw over to you for the first part of that because I think it's going to be a really important discussion. The dilemma of being authentic at work. What's that look like for you in your experience?
Well, I don't know whether or not it's neurodiversity or whether or not it's just my personality, but it's really difficult for me not to show up exactly as I am and say the
Mm,
things that I think and feel, and that's actually led to a lot of challenges in the workplace. Um, questioning things when people wanted me to be quiet, asking questions that didn't, that kind of like made people uncomfortable because it it questioned the things that they were doing. So I guess if we're talking about statistically, there statistically 61% of employees say they cover up some part of their identity at work. So if I think about
mm,
what part of that I would have been potentially covering up, maybe my insecurities of not fitting in. So if I'm being
mm,
totally reflective of what I used to try to hide was my insecurities of not fitting in, and maybe my, you know, self-belief that wasn't that high when I was working in corporate life. And the way that manifested is it would make me
mm,
really defensive, or I would, you know, kill myself to achieve targets just to prove points, and
mm,
overwork and be incredibly stressed and not that great fun to be around. So that's what
mm.
comes from the top of my head off of that.
Yeah, it resonates with me, and there's so many moving parts to that question because, on some level, even neurotypical people are going to be changing themselves for a work environment. I mean, that's kind of social skills 101 in terms of adapting to your environment to make sure we can all kind of fit in. But I think for neurodivergent people, it's often slightly more difficult, depending on what I wouldn't say problems, but what kind of thing you deal with on a day-to-day basis. And even from an ethnic diversity point of view as well, it's often referred to as code switching. You put I call it my white phone voice, when I'm like, "Hello, sir, how are you?" Lovely stuff, and I get off the phone. I'm like, "Jesus, wagwan blood." It's like you go back to you go back to your roots a little bit. Um, but I completely resonate with what you said about how it manifested for you at work in terms of like overworking and proving a point. I've definitely been there, but also just when you have those moments that make you like, oh, I just don't belong here. It just like I'm sticking out like a sore thumb incredibly. And I think enough times passed to tell this story. But I was working for an agency. I was working with a horse related charity to keep things obscure. And we were doing an ad about kind of getting donations for this charity, right? And it was about the relationship between horse and its owner, and there was like some voiceover for some nice kind of slow mo riding. It was like when we got lost in the woods and we thought we couldn't find our way back, and which is our first view of the ad once it's finished. And I was like, horses don't get lost. And everyone was like, no, no, it's about, they're lost together, da da da. And everyone kind of shot my point down. I was just out there like, horses know where they're going, mate. They don't get lost. Like they're out in the woods, they're supposed to be in the woods. They know what they're doing. Um, and then everyone kind of was like, kind of smushed that point down a bit. And then when the MD comes in and sits down, first thing he says about the ad is horses don't get lost. And I was like, why are you not listening to me when I say it? And that just kind of bred that immediate, man, it's just me against the man. They just don't want to listen to me, man. So like, it's that like that defensiveness. I'm like immediately, I'm like, yeah, that was me. Because you just have those moments. You're like, you put your freaking feet in the ground. You're like, no, this is where I fight. So
Well,
yeah, me being a troublemaker.
so that's a really good point because your role probably has a little box that the organization expects you to stay in. Now, when the MD
Yeah.
challenges your perspective or challenges and repeats exactly what you've said, his box or her box may be slightly higher up and people are okay with whatever comes out of their mouth. But the
Mm,
box that you're supposed to fit into means that, yeah, no, you don't get the special allowances that an MD gets. And that's where it's really, and that's a really good analogy actually, because why is it, why
mm,
do they listen to the exact same point when it comes out of somebody else's mouth versus yours? And
yeah.
I guess that's where, and if we're talking about the workplace and how they create boxes or archetypes for employees to fit into,
Mm,
what do we do when we know that that's not our natural style or way of being? It's almost
yeah.
impossible to show up as your authentic self or your happiest, most fulfilled self if you're a
Mm.
contortionist and you're trying to fit into something that is just not made for you.
Yeah, yeah, and like unbeknownst to them, as soon as I had that moment, that I mentally quit in that moment, and then handed in my notice probably like a month later or something. So I was just like, get me, I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. I'm done. So yeah, it's I think again, I think it's an ADHD issue, and I'm not sure if it's there is a specific term for it, but there is a problem with authority that comes with ADHD, and even just being told what to do. It's a bit like being, if anyone's familiar with Cat in the Hat, being thing one and thing two, we will do the opposite of what we're told to do. As soon as someone tells me what to do, I'm just like, no, like immediately. But I obviously we then fight that and then kind of function as normal human beings. But that is internally the first thing I will say.
Interesting.
So dealing with that, yeah, don't tell me what to do. Especially when I've because these were the key moments that led me to start my business. So me saying the same things in MD but not getting the same reaction. Me working with my first business owner. So I only met my first business owner when I was like 21, 22. Like my world was very separated from any type of business before. And then when I actually saw someone who runs a small business up close, I was like, I could do this. What are you talking about? I could do that. And it's some self belief there, but also it was just that kind of rejection of authority there to go, if he can do it, I can do it. And I do that with a lot of different figures. This is why I put out a lot of content when a lot of people often have some scares around that. And I'm just like, they're the same as me. I can do this. If they can do this, I can do this. And I'm quite defiant in that.
Mhm.
And it's something that really bugs me. But I think that's just a kind of unique thing to me. But maybe it is a kind of neurodivergent baseline across the rest of them that people can feel like that. But I'm pretty sure that's in somewhere in the personality profile that we did not long ago.
Yeah, the lack of the low compliance. And so just really quickly, so I want to go on to this, but I'm just going to let you know that from my side, your visuals aren't all 100% clear, but that should be okay, right, from your side?
Oh,
Okay.
absolutely. See, this is the benefit of working with Riverside FM
Okay.
because things are recorded locally on my side, so it will upload in full quality. So if anyone wants to make virtual podcasts, Riverside FM, definitely use it. Recommend.
Riverside, come
Please sponsor
on.
the podcast.
Yeah, sponsor the podcast. Okay, so on that point of, oh shoot, shouldn't have gone off track, but I
It's what podcasts are
you
for.
were talking about the defiance. So the disobedience, the low compliance, my mother would say as a child that I was incredibly disobedient. And it's
Mm.
interesting because I don't know whether, and that whole thing of, well, if you can do it, I can do it. But do you think that there's also like in our neurodiversity, we don't see things in a hierarchical way? So if, so I have friends, and I say friends, I have one friend who's a billionaire who is extremely successful and
Damn.
started a mega successful company. And I would treat him probably, be more challenging to him than I would somebody who was
Mm,
cleaning my apartment, for instance. I don't see importance of, or even in organizations that I've worked with, I've treated everybody the same. And do you think
mm.
that neurodiversity comes into play because there is no true, like, respecting authority isn't the right word. It's just because you're an authority doesn't mean you're automatically granted
Yeah.
special allowances, or I'm going to bend over backwards to please you.
Yeah, so I think there's inbuilt fear from like let's if we take the UK system, you're supposed to kind of fear slash respect whoever's in charge, and so your teachers and then your lecturers and so on and so forth, and then your boss. Like that hierarchical thing is drummed into you, and I think it's not necessarily. I know there's probably not any stats on it, possibly, but like I'm pretty sure neurodivergency helps because there's especially for those on the autistic spectrum, the want to know why is just like right at the top, right? So when you start questioning anything and when you start questioning authority, that's when things start to come off the rails a bit in terms of hierarchical structures. So at least in my experience, that's how I would look at it. Like it's probably a helping stepping stone, but I'm sure there's neurotypical people as well that would be that would question, especially if someone's either abusing their power or not the best leader or manager in that situation. I'm sure people would be like, ooh, and start to question what's actually going on here and looking deeper.
Hmm. Yeah, well, really interesting. We could probably go on to that all day. But so, what about the
Mm,
psychological toll of not being authentic? I think that so a stat from Gallup says 43% of employees feel emotionally exhausted when they can't express their true selves at work. What are your thoughts
mm.
on that?
Well, I completely resonate. I mean, my job history doesn't look the best probably to any kind of potential employer because I was constantly searching for something that I couldn't find, and a lot of times it's. I think there's only a couple of times where I've always been a high performer, like the no, never it's never a chance of I was going to be fired or anything. It was a case of I have one specific moment or a couple of moments that lead to me going, that's it, they're gone. And I'll look for something new automatically. I think a lot of people refer to it as quiet quitting, things like that, and you'll just be on the hunt for something new. And it all comes from all the little things that add up, and you're not feeling comfortable in your environment, or you have particular moments, or kind of standoffs with managers, or it's just an extremely stressful role. They demand too much. There's so much that can go into it. But when you're especially if you have a very high stress job, it's pretty hard to even find time to be yourself in that because you're just locked into whatever you're doing. So yeah, psychological toll is you're probably out of there quick time. At least that was my reaction to things. It was constantly moving that, looking for that perfect place, that utopia where I was meant to be, grass is greener type situation, and at least that's the physical output. And obviously, I was burnt out in that situation. I just didn't realize I was until it was kind of too late.
Hmm. Well, you burn a lot of energy. Like, let's just say you've got 100% energy every single day, and then the more that you're in your flow state, doing the things that come naturally to you, doing the things that excite
Mm,
you, that you could just do over and over again and never get bored, versus showing up in environments that don't bring out your natural strengths, or having to do tasks aren't that you're not naturally good at, that takes more energy than it
mm,
does to just go with the flow and be your best self. And so I think that, when you're talking about burnout, it affects 77% of professionals, but they mask a lot of the behaviors, which continues it on
mm,
for longer. So, for instance, I was just brought up in an environment where you don't stop working and you don't not achieve your targets, and you don't, there's no option for failure. So when
mm,
I was really being, I mistreated or mismanaged in the workplace to the point where I was just so unhappy, constantly feeling anxious, extremely
Hmm.
stressed, unable to sleep. I I just kept going. But again, the effects, so my psychological toll would have been extreme. So I started seeing a therapist to help me cope with that. But I really feel
Hmm.
like the workplace needs to take more accountability in supporting people. So what could some things be when, what could managers or leaders be doing in order to encourage an environment that allows people to show up as their most authentic selves?
I mean, there's a thousand different ways you could go about it. I think one of the easiest things to implement, especially for those managers that do consistent one-to-ones, is have more of a casual, laid-back one-to-one on a more regular basis, and change the environment from office or virtual call to we're going to go down the pub or we're going to go to a restaurant or something and we're going to have our one-to-one. Because when you're in an outside of work environment or an outside of work call, it feels different. The environment can relax you and change your mindset, because for me, environment dictates a lot of how I think. So I'd be far more open in terms of what I would be talking about if I'm not at the office. Because imagine if you're having a one-to-one with your manager and you're just in kind of like not like a co-working area, but the kind of open plan,
Mm,
we're all fun and hip areas that a lot of offices have. You often have one-to-ones in. There's people walking all over. The MD could walk past any minute and you'd be talking about your grievances. You're going to clam up. You're going to, not want to do that. So I'm like, right, we're heading down the spoons. We're going to grab the 3 for 10 or 3 for 12.50 now because the economy, and we're gonna hash this out, and you're gonna talk about what's going on with you. And this does depend on the relationship you have with your team. Like, not everyone's gonna want to like say it's not about saying everything about your personal life. It's just changing the environment so those little things may reveal themselves, right? That's the approach I would take to it, because honestly, change of environment equals change of mindset, and you might get more out of it. But it's the initiative of that leader to go, actually, I think we should do it that way and take a more personable approach to progress for your team. Because if I reflect on my own journey, I think I was ruthlessly ambitious, not to the point where I would like step over people or anything like that, but I wanted progress extremely fast. And I wasn't happy as soon as I saw that I was locked into a role that was just like, we just need someone to do that job and say nothing. I'm like, no, I need challenge immediately. And I think if someone had identified that, they would have gotten a super soldier in what they're doing. They would have got a Swiss Army knife of
mm,
stuff. But without it being identified, they had no idea, and they were just like, "Why are you so restless?" I'm like, "Because I'm bored. That's
mm,
why." I could do this with my eyes closed. So being able to find that first, whether they find those jet engines that we talked about in the previous episode.
mm. Well, I mean, when you were talking, what came to mind was, okay, bringing somebody outside of the work environment is one way, but if they aren't truly interested in getting to know the people that are working for them on a more authentic level. So, not just giving them feedback on you're doing this right, these are areas for improvement, but
Mm,
hey, listen, how happy are you with the work that you're doing, and what makes you tick, and what do you feel really passionate about, what are your goals for this year that we can make sure align to what it is that you're doing. I think that, going that those layers beneath the surface are
mm,
really important as well.
mm.
Um, and
Because it's hard to identify that sometimes, right? Because if you think about imposter syndrome, you can see a lot of reactions to imposter syndrome. You see people pull back and only kind of do the bare minimum because they don't kind of believe in their abilities. Or, in my case, I would overwork to try and prove a point to prove that I wasn't an imposter in this scenario. And I didn't even know I was feeling really imposter syndrome and a lot of anxiety around that, because I hadn't really identified it on a personal level. So leaders also have the challenge of people even quite not knowing what's going on for them either. And you can look for signs as much as possible, but ultimately, not every leader can be a trained psychologist to find these things out. So a lot of self-reflection and kind of in inward looking stuff can be actually really helpful for yourself to then get the best out of your manager slash leader as well, because it's a two-way street there. But yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot.
well, Deloitte did a study, and and it said covering parts of our identity is common. 45% of employees of color, 61% of women, and 79% of
Mm,
LGBTQ plus employees report doing it. So, I mean, we can definitely relate from the biracial, neurodiverse. It would be interesting to know about the neurodiverse perspective there too.
mm,
And yeah, but so I guess it's when employees are, required to fit into these boxes and they feel that they can't innovate or share ideas or they might get shot down. What are
mm,
some things that within the creative space, if you have marketing leaders that you're working with, but the C level just doesn't get their vision at all, and
mm.
they just need to follow their old school way of branding and everything like that.
Yeah.
What do you say to them?
It's tricky because, in my position now, I'd be very challenging, obviously in a positive way, and talking about, the actual impacts it will have on the bottom line, and thinking very, very top level on how basically the earth has changed, let alone, the customer base. Mindsets around everything has changed. And if a C-suite hasn't already identified that, if they're sat there blind, you're kind of cooked already. But it's nigh on impossible for someone internal, especially if they're on the younger side or the early in their career, or even mid-level managers, to challenge C-suite on a level where they'll be taken seriously. And I think that's, you never see companies do, meet the C-suite, like come and have a chat with the board, or the CEO of this, like drop in open door policy on like Thursday once a month or something. Because that hierarchical structure that then kind of goes back to that fear we were talking about,
Mm,
just kind of exists there. And like the higher up they seem, the more wise they seem, and the more kind of untouchable they are. And this massive barrier is then created to the point where you'll never try and go against that grain. And often it'll be an external consultant or something that will come in and say the same thing you were thinking, and then before you know it, it's changed. I feel like a lot of internal marketing teams have seen an agency come in and say the same thing that they've been saying, but they listen to the agency over the internal team.
mm,
So it's a very frustrating experience. There's not much you can really do about it because job security is important, and depending on where you are in the world, employment standards and protections might not be as generous as they are in the UK. So is it worth taking the risk for a lot of employees to challenge the C-suite and kind of get things moving? Probably not. Um, but it's a debate.
yeah, I think it really depends on how you can back up what you're saying. So I think one of the biggest areas that I've realized could have helped me, especially with my low compliance and lack of focus around data and information, would have been if I
Mm,
am challenging something, instead of just saying, well, I just know that this is going to work better. I know my clients, I know the industry and the market. I should have backed it up with data. So, evidence and evidence that would support my my argument rather than just, going in there feeling like they should be able to read my mind or understand, especially
mm,
if their personality is naturally prone to not like change, so they're high in steadiness, or if they're high compliance and process and rules are important to them, then
mhm.
those are the ones that are going to take a lot of a lot more persuading, but aligning it to the goal. So what does it mean for the bottom line, and how could this help improve things? If you tie things back to revenue and success, sometimes, I would imagine that that would be
Yeah,
more helpful. Um,
probably from a C-suite point of view, anyway. Yeah, to see what's the effect on the numbers going to be.
mhm. Well, that leader, when you were talking about having meeting the C level, this he's now retired, and this ex CEO, and billionaire. He was literally going around in the office of the company that he built, talking to people, knew about, my friends, um, what they were doing in volunteering, and had a genuine interest. So and then the
Mm,
culture, that you're creating. So it's like, what kind of culture do you want to create? Do you want a fear-based culture where people are going to feel stifled and scared of speaking up? So actually anybody sharing ideas is going to be highly unlikely, or do you want to encourage an open, inclusive culture that is and training your management, your leaders to encourage that
mm,
that openness. There's a stat that says companies with inclusive cultures are 1.7 times more likely to be innovative leaders. So in
mm,
their space. So I guess you know, you for people who don't want to go out there and start their own business. If you were to go back
mhm,
to when you had all these ideas and instead of quitting, you stuck with it and wanted to be
mm.
seen and heard, what would you do differently?
It's a it's an interesting question because I think there's a second part that no one really addresses when it comes to this, and it's what is the benefit of me taking this risk in the first place,
And the risk is
like
of speaking,
financially specifically.
the risk is speaking
Well,
out.
yeah. So let's say if I put together, so this like let's say if it's a what I see as a fault in our marketing approach, and I am a just standard account manager or internal marketing person, just say marketing manager, and I have a theory with some data that goes, I think we're making a major error here, and here's what I would do differently. Which challenges the authority of everyone above you that signed off on that decision. I then have to take that risky pitch to the most senior person I can get a hold of because some companies you'll never speak to the C-suite. And then I have to pitch something which could put my reputation at risk because a lot of people above me might see that as me usurping their authority and ideas. Because people will latch onto that. So now I'm going to cause myself a whole heap of potential trouble, and I'm not going to get paid an extra penny for it.
Hmm.
I might be like recognized. I might go around on a company email or something. That's probably all I'm gonna get. Like if you're very intent on playing the corporate game to get recognized and you want to make a name for yourself, then possibly. But if I reflect back on my time, I was already getting extremely underpaid as a marketer. Like to get what I'm worth, I had to start my own company because marketing in the creative sphere get paid, for lack of a better term, piss all, in my opinion, internally in the UK, especially compared to our US counterparts. So if I'd have gone back in time, I think I would have probably come to the same conclusion. It's like if you want me to take a risk, come up with some better ideas, where's the Skrilla? Where's the money? Because why should I bother? I can just turn up, do my job, and leave if that's all I'm going to get paid to do.
Right.
Um, but if there was a company that had some kind of financial or performance-based incentive for marketing, because it often exists for other departments, finance and sales, but not in the creative sphere. So if there was something like that, I would be far more inclined to challenge the status quo, impose my ideas, present my ideas, and then try and make the world, the company, a better place. But without an incentive scheme, why should I bother? Just put money in someone else's pocket. And that's my kind of very liberal socialist point of view on it. But I'm like, slash capitalist, because at the end of the day, I'm like, where's my money? So that I look at it very black and white now, I suppose, because I was already underpaid then. And for me to take a big risk for nothing,
Hmm.
why?
Yeah. I really like that, tying it. So let's say you're creating marketing for a product, and then the success of that product is like a joint effort from product, sales, marketing, and if you achieve the outcome, then you all win. You all get a bonus at the end of the year from the profitability. And actually, there's a really good episode.
Should be that
Yeah,
way.
I spoke to an incredible Gartner analyst this week who came up with a theory 12 years ago, over 12 years ago, on little clusters of people working together. So we'll get into that another time. Hopefully, I can bring him on to the show.
Mm,
But so if you're talking about also the psychological safety, so employees who feel valued and are and feel like they can be themselves are more likely to stay and perform well. So Google's
Hmm.
Project Aristotle, that we've already mentioned in previous episodes, really say that teams with high psychological safety are the ones that perform
Hmm.
better. They're the ones who increase productivity. And
Mm.
if somebody shows up happier at work, if they feel more fulfilled and listened to, inevitably they're going to do better work for you and work harder and be loyal and all
Yeah.
of those things. Just like in a relationship, just like in your
Hmm.
relationships at home. So so if we're talking about cultural norms, that why people don't feel safe showing up. I mean, we did already kind of touch on that, but there's also in England in particular, it was a big culture shock for me coming here and speaking out. And my colleagues would say, "Oh, I can't believe you said that in that meeting." Even though they all agreed with me, they couldn't believe that I
Yeah.
said it. So, how do you
Talk of the tea
get,
round.
how do you kind of like move out of that space?
Uh,
Short
well,
of moving countries, of course.
yeah, I was going to say the the nihilistic side of me slash cynicism is it one of the fancy pants terms basically just says well, it's probably a culture issue for a start. Stiff upper lip, keep calm, carry on, don't push the status quo. Those who are in charge of the upper class. That is baked into British society, at least in my opinion. It's tough to change.
Mm.
So you won't find people as outspoken as maybe a US or a Canadian or even a New Zealand marketer might be from a cultural perspective. Possibly, that's just a guess. I've got no data on it. Don't kill me.
Mm.
But at least from trying to create an environment of psychological safety probably has multiple factors, and it will each company culture will depend per person, right? So for a start, it's going to be culture fit for that person. Sometimes you'll have someone that's needs everything laid out for them, super. I need a checklist, and then don't disrupt this checklist because I need to go through it type person. Versus me is that who cares about checklists? What we doing? Ideas. Da, da, da. So there's that comes into it, right? So culture fit for a start. Then you move straight into right. How do I create that from a leadership level? Like I'd want to see all managers, all leaders, and C-suite doing that kind of walk around the office and just go, "Oh, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? How you doing? You doing good? I like your work. Hey, nice jacket, Tom. Like I want to see like I want to see stuff like that because that makes me feel good. Like when I know my leaders are that woman's badass or that guy's cool. Like I like that. Like
Mm.
I want to see them as human beings, which is sometimes tough to do when the hierarchy's in front of you. Imagine first day you're a junior and you're wetting yourself and you're thinking this is going to be exactly like the movies. It's going to be like the New York Stock Exchange or some madness. And then you get in and the CEO offers you a cup of tea
Yeah.
and then sits down with you, talks to you about the basketball game with footy last night. It's those type of things. They go, oh, okay. And then that's the starting point.
Mm.
Then it happens from the one-to-ones, how you're structured, how they feel that you're being looked after. Like I feel like you could remove all of the kind of corporate pizza parties and benefits, but if you focused on the human interactions there and how people interact with each other in that environment, and how you're praised for your progress and how you'd like to be acknowledged for your progress,
Mm.
those are probably the most important things to create that safety net for someone to do their best work. Because when you care about the people around you, you feel like, and it's a shared emotional experience, that's when you're going to put in the work, even when you're not getting the money for it.
Yeah.
Because my previous perspective before was from I couldn't give a monkey's about this company. I'd take action if you're going to pay me. But the times where I've enjoyed my role, I've forgotten the fact that I should be thinking financially about it and I've gone overboard because I'm here for us, the people, our team. This is our squad, right? Once you can create that and almost like a sports team mentality, you win big. And that, at least from my perspective, that is how I see it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, um, if we're talking about how to kind of break free from these corporate boxes so that we can show up more authentically, there are a couple of tips
Hmm.
that we have. So one of them, be authentic in safe spaces and maybe test the waters. And your team is obviously one of them, but seek out coworkers or mentors who you believe value diverse perspectives, and
Mm.
how they, maybe ask them how did they get to where they are while remaining themselves, because at the end of the day it is important to still respect certain things around the workplace. And you can't show up in your onesie and be totally without
Yeah.
without uh you know just not caring at all. But I think that tools like
Hmm.
DISC, the personality profiling, to understand your personality in the first place and some of your strengths and limitations, that can help if you want to articulate that with your leader or some of your team members. That can help explain, hey, listen, this is my personality. I'm not intentionally trying to challenge you or piss you off. It is because
Mm.
I I naturally question things if I see another way. That's just who I
Yeah.
am. And that comes with a lot of benefits to the roles as well. And I guess
Big
we
time.
we should really, it would be really interesting to hear from anybody who has, one, had felt like they had to quit because they couldn't be in the environment and show up authentically. Like, so it's a real shame. I think it's such a shame. It's such an expensive process for organizations to hire talent like you, James, and then
Mm.
not allow you to be your creative self, and then you just slink off to another company. I mean, that is just such a drain on an organization.
Yeah. Big time. And I think again, it how maybe I see things in a weird way, right? But I think my perspective on things would have completely changed if I had more leaders and less managers in my time. Not to say that anyone I've worked with has been bad by any means, but this is what would get me jazzed up, right? To use a very geeky analogy, I want I want the Lord of the Rings style. Like give me Aragorn, give me Thorin Oakenshield, give me Theoden King, King of Rohan, the people that are on the front lines with me, leading the way and showing me by example how kick-ass their work is. Because if I know the guy 5 steps ahead of me has created some incredible stuff, or that that's 10 steps ahead of me is leading for a damn good reason, and they weren't just there long enough to be there. Like I will question someone who's been there like 30 years, and that's the reason they got there, versus someone that got there either faster or has some just incredible, like massive moments. And I'm like, that's what I aspire to be. That's my power scaling there that I'm trying to get to. That's a very nerdy and anime way to look at it, but I'm like, that's what I can respect more in that scenario. That would get me invested personally. But it would take a hell of a lot of digging for you to find that out about me. And I think that's self-reflection on my part, and it also that those kind of one-on-one interactions, you can tell the type of person you're working with. So, but again, those casual one-to-ones, they unlock that. You find out the type of person you're working with, and I think we can get down to that kind of interactions. More human stuff wins the day.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. Well, so we've talked a lot, and I'm super excited about a guest that we have next week who dives into our energy and alignment and
Ooh.
sleepwalkers, people who are just going through life and people who are truly awake, and how if you're not fully aligned and being your authentic self, it's impossible to have a life that you love, or live a life that you love, or love the life you live, or whatever those sayings are.
Mm.
So
Live, laugh,
live,
love.
well, yeah, that's a bit too contrived for me. Thanks, James.
It's on someone's wall listening to this.
Oh yeah. Love it. Just kidding. That's not authentic at all. So let's find out. I'd love to know from comments. Do you feel like you can show up authentically at work? Yes, no, sometimes. And if you're
Mm.
interested in more topics like this, let us know, share some suggestions, and yeah, catch you next time. Thanks, James.
Looking forward to it. See you soon, guys.
Bye.